He's running. Which way is he running?
Down towards the other entrance of the neighborhood.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
All right, sir. What is your name?
George. He ran.
All right, joining me now with reaction, Joe Oliver, who is a friend of George Zimmerman's, and Shannon Butler, who has been following the story for our affiliate, Fox 35 in Orlando. Guys, welcome to the program, and thanks for being here. Shannon, let me start with you. We were originally told, and it was originally reported, that, in fact, there were no eyewitnesses to the case. You have interviewed the one person that we're now told was an eyewitness from the very beginning. Is that to be true? Is that true?
Yeah, there have been several witnesses who've come out since the initial report. The witness I think you're referring to is John, and John is the one that said that he actually saw the scuffle between the two. Other people that we interviewed said they heard the screams, they knew there was some kind of confrontation, but this guy told us that he actually saw what he said was Trayvon Martin on top of George Zimmerman beating him, and that's when he called 911. He said Zimmerman was actually saying to him, "Please help me, please help me." He said then he went upstairs while he was calling 911, and by then it was too late. That gunshot had already gone off.
What can you tell us? And he was saying that, in fact, if it was George Zimmerman on the bottom and Zimmerman was beating up, does that not corroborate, in spite of all the media coverage and all those that have been speaking out politically about this, does that not contradict the narrative that's been heard in the media up to this point?
Well, we hadn't heard George Zimmerman's side really of the story except for a few of those witnesses like John. But today the Sanford police did make it clear that what George Zimmerman told them was that he was actually getting back into his SUV when he said Trayvon Martin came around the left-hand side of him. And he says that Trayvon Martin said, "Do you have a problem?" And he said no. And then Trayvon said something like, "Well, you do now." Then George Zimmerman told the cops that he got punched in the nose, he hit the ground, and that's when Trayvon Martin jumped on top of him and slammed his head into the sidewalk, and that's when he began to yell for help. I mean, that's what Sanford police tell us that George Zimmerman told them.
And again, just to be clear about this, because this is a really important point, as far as we know at this point, this would be the only eyewitness that we know in this case?
That we know of that has actually come forward on this case. Not the only eyewitness, the only eyewitness that says he saw Trayvon Martin on top of George Zimmerman.
But the other
We've interviewed other witnesses who have said that screaming on the tape was not George Zimmerman, it was Trayvon Martin.
All right, now,
that's what all the other witnesses have said.
All right, Joe, I know you're a friend, and I know you've been on some other TV shows. The implication and the allegation by many that this was a case of racial profiling, that some have suggested this was racially motivated. This is somebody you know, somebody that's your friend. Have you spoken with him, and what has he told you?
Well, yes, I have spoken to him. I spoke with George earlier today, and I actually got the details of what happened after that confrontation that was reported in the paper today. That's what he told me is the reason why he's not in jail right now. I wish I could tell you what he told me and what the investigation has turned up. That's information that's not coming out until the grand jury convenes, if there is a grand jury. The frustration for George and for everyone who's involved with this is that there hasn't been enough information out there to get a clear picture of what happened. And the biggest missing picture is what happened from the time George said okay after being told that he didn't have to follow Trayvon to the time that someone saw Trayvon on top of George and heard the gun go off.
Is there an answer to that, Joe? Because the one thing that struck me as I listened to that tape, and they said, no, we don't need you to do that. I'm just trying to put myself in that position, assuming what he's saying, that this area had been hit particularly hard with crime recently. For whatever reason, he saw somebody he didn't recognize in the neighborhood. He called 911. They told him to do that. Is there an answer to that question, why he followed when they said don't?
Well, no, there's not an answer to that question because we don't know for sure that he actually did follow him.
Well, you can hear it. You can actually hear on the tape.
Hang on. I know. Yeah. Hang on.
Right,
you hear him running, and then you hear the dispatcher telling him, after asking if he was following him, that he said, "You don't have to do that." George responded, "Okay." So we don't know if George was following Trayvon after that. And the information that has come out since today says he was returning to his vehicle when he was confronted by Trayvon.
You've heard about the new Black Panther Party. I'm sure you probably know that apparently Spike Lee has sent out the address of your friend. You know other comments that have been made by Reverend Jackson and the Reverend Al Sharpton and some others in this case. You've known him for how long a period of time?
About 6 years now. I've known him ever since he started dating his wife.
We've also gotten reports that not only himself was he a minority, had minority family members, but that he also tutored, and he and his wife would tutor African-American kids, minority kids for free on the weekend. Is that true?
That is true. George would help anybody, regardless of race, creed, or color.
Then what do you make of this allegation that those have said that somehow this is a racial incident?
Because of the history of the Sanford Police Department in particular and the early characterizations that George is white. That's going to inflame anyone as we continue to see those pictures of Trayvon as a young child. And I, for one, will tell you that if I didn't know George because of the history of the Sanford Police Department that I am familiar with, I would have been screaming for an arrest along with everyone else.
Yeah.
But I do know George Zimmerman, and I know he's not a racist, and I know what he's told me, and I know what the evidence is. And until the evidence comes out, we're not going to be able to start turning the corner. But what we're seeing now, which I expected to happen because it's taken so long to get information out, is that whatever information is put out there is being discredited because it does not put Trayvon in a good light.
I have said from day one there's a rush to judgment, and I can see it in the media. We'll discuss this in the next segment. And I think maybe now that more information has come out, people might be a little more responsible, especially in the media. Shannon, one last question for you. Did the police, Shannon, know that this eyewitness existed, that somewhat corroborated the story, and that they knew this from the beginning? Because that would answer a question maybe why an arrest was not made.
Yes, they did. According to John told us they did talk to the police because he said that he actually saw a picture that the police showed him of George Zimmerman and said, was this the guy? So according to John, yes, he has spoken to the police, which would speak to kind of somebody backing up what George Zimmerman had told them originally.
All right, Shannon, great reporting. Thank you for being with us. And Joe, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And coming up next, we're going to continue to follow the developments out of Florida. Up next, we examine how the media has been reporting on the death of Trayvon Martin. And then later,